Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek 2023, the Summer of Trek. This is a BookTube event created by Vin at Revenant Reads. He's assembled a great bridge crew of BookTubers to talk about Star Trek fiction all summer long. Now, I've been overdoing it, I think. I've been, in my usual way, I've been doing a video almost every day about the Star Trek book that I add to my night's reading the night before. Just been, those of you who are new to my channel, I do a lot of reading, and I read all night long, and I pile a bunch of books. I select my reading ahead of time for the night, and pile a bunch of books either onto the nightstand or onto the iPad so that I can just read all night long. And that roster is largely determined by whatever new releases are coming to bear. My guns are coming to bear on whatever new releases, but it can also be other stuff. And for BookTube events, it's definitely other stuff. So I've been adding a Star Trek novel. I paused yesterday in order to do a Star Trek tag. But I have a Star Trek novel for today that's a reread, and it's a continuation of an earlier video that I did in Book Trek, where I did The Dominion War, Book 1, by John Vornhold. And today I'm talking a little bit about The Dominion War, Book 2, by Diane Carey. This is a 4-book series that was done to sort of in some way attempt to begin to dramatize the gigantic event of Deep Space Nine, the Star Trek series Deep Space Nine, which is a gigantic war between the Alpha Quadrant and the Dominion. Gigantic space empire, an evil space empire from through a wormhole that's run by immortal shapeshifters and staffed by cloned, quisling apparatchiks and enforced by cloned warriors, the Jem'Hadar, who are almost unbeatable in combat. The Dominion War rages for a couple of seasons of Deep Space Nine, and gradually the story evolves to the point where all of the major empires of the Alpha Quadrant realize they must band together in order to defeat this menace, or they will fall separately. So the Federation, the Klingons, the Romulans, the Cardassians, they all band together to fight the Dominion. And that's an epic story that was a long time in the coming. I don't know if the showrunners for Deep Space Nine knew quite how long that had been a dream of Star Trek fans, but it was terrifically done. And it deserves a book. I wouldn't say a series. It deserves a big book. It's settled canon now. It's long in the past. Other things have happened. No one's going to go back and do anything with this. Pocket Books or Paramount, they don't have to worry about someone writing the story of the Dominion War. I would love to see that book. But instead, they did a 4-part series. There is a MacGuffin that runs throughout a couple of these books, of the Dominion trying to create an artificial wormhole, another wormhole, in order to help them defeat the Alpha Quadrant. It's not very consistently or very well done, and this book doesn't do it at all. This book is just Diane Carey repurposing, lightly, very gently repurposing the telescripts for Deep Space Nine, for the war episodes of Deep Space Nine. The stuff that's in here will be 90% familiar to people who know Deep Space Nine, who've watched those episodes. Diane Carey, I think, is very good at this sort of thing. She adds lots of, wherever she can, she adds lots of personality and context while staying true to the parameters that are already there on the screen. Like with her reimaginings of the original show, certain episodes of the original show, I can just easily picture her crawling her way through these episodes minute by minute, making a list of the things that aren't included, the things that aren't mentioned but must have happened. And you get a lot of that here in this book, but I think maybe because I just got off reading John Vornhold's Dominion War Book 1, which tells the story of the Enterprise during the Dominion War, Captain Picard and his crew during the Dominion War, which is the thing you're going to want to know, right? That's a story that hasn't been told, and you're going to want to know what the flagship of the Federation was doing during the war. This book, I guess maybe because I was just coming off that, this felt more disappointing than when I first read this. Diane Carey is one of my favorite Star Trek writers. I think because I love the way she gets the characters and is willing to pause the action in order to give us interiority, as the lit dudes say. But this isn't that. reading this fresh from John Vornholt writing quote-unquote original stuff about the Dominion War made me wish that that pocketbooks would conscript somebody. It could be Diane Carey if she's still alive and still writing, or find somebody else, maybe not one of the current crew of anointed Star Trek writers who are usually pretty boring. They're competent but dull. Maybe find somebody else to do it. I'm sure you would have no shortage of volunteers if you opened up the contest. No shortage of volunteers. I'd be willing to bet that the writing combo that gave us the Expanse novels, would volunteer to write that manuscript free. An 800-page, 600-page science fiction novel that is the story of the Dominion War. That would be incredible. I know exactly how you would do it. Do it Winds of War style or Killer Angel style. Pick a cast of about 6 people that see most of the action. For Star Trek fans, you could have some of those characters, some of those 6 people be characters that we know. But then you could pick others that we don't know, that show us parts of the Dominion War that we didn't see in the teleplay or in any of the fan fiction that's been done. And give it a big, sprawling feel. So revert to those 6 characters, but also have interstitial chapters where it's a broader historical narrative. Make it a history. But that hasn't been done, and this doesn't get us very close, because this retreads old ground. Mostly, it retreads old ground. I have a feeling, if I remember correctly, the Dominion War series, the 4 books, alternate between the 2. I think the next book is more of the Enterprise during the Dominion War. Stuff that we haven't seen, stuff that isn't part of canon. And then maybe we shift in book 4 to more of the same. I don't think I'll follow it. I think I'm done with the Dominion War stuff for now. For this reread, I think did it. This is a fairly weak book. All it mainly served to do was remind me of the great moments from the episodes of Deep Space Nine that cover the Dominion War, and there are lots of such great episodes. Some of my favorite Star Trek sequences in any sequence, in any franchise, are part of the Dominion War, or the lead up to the Dominion War. In the lead up to the Dominion War, the Federation goes to war very briefly with the Klingons. Peace breaks down between the Federation and the Klingons. Which is exactly what, as Benjamin Sisko and a few other characters point out, that's exactly what the Dominion wants. They want us fighting ourselves so that it will be easier for them to pick off. That brief moment where the Klingons are at war with the Federation and the moments leading up to that are terrific. Absolutely terrific. I was watching Deep Space Nine every week when that was happening, and I remember telling the few friends who could stand to listen to me on the subject, I remember telling them, I'm all in favor of what the Next Generation did in giving us 3-dimensional Klingons and fleshing them out. And I'm all in favor of all of the nuanced stuff that has happened since. But as an original Star Trek fan, there's a primal joy in the Federation versus the Klingons. There's a joy in that I can't really describe. It doesn't make any sense, but it was definitely true in those episodes. Oh my. Including one particular episode that I have dragged every guest here at Hyde Cottage through, where we see how the crew of Deep Space Nine would fare in hand-to-hand combat against the Klingons. Which doesn't happen that often, right? We don't get that in the Next Generation. We don't really get that in the original series, although it's heavily implied. And we only barely get little hints and pieces of it in Voyager, of course, because Voyager is far from the action. But in Deep Space Nine, we got the pleasure of seeing how our bridge crew would measure up if they had to fight Klingons in hand-to-hand combat. The bridge crew, so to speak, of Deep Space Nine is pretty formidable, right? It's not. You have Benjamin Sisko, who is a volcano of anger. He's not anyone you want mad at you, even if he is just a human. He's not anyone you want mad at you. But there's also Kira Nerys, who is a seasoned resistance fighter. She's fought the Cardassians her whole life, including in hand-to-hand combat. You have Worf, who's at this point in the show, he is on the station as their security chief, and he is extremely adept at physical combat, to put it mildly. He's extremely adept. You also have Odo, who's a shapeshifter, for all intents and purposes unbeatable in physical combat. And so on down the line. You also have Jadzia Dax, who looks like a very beautiful science officer, but she is a joined Trill. and has centuries of hand-to-hand combat experience, as she shows in that moment. And that automatically makes you think, it automatically makes me think of how the other bridge crews would fare if they had to fight a Klingon boarding party in hand-to-hand combat with batleths, but not with phasers. That automatically makes me think of it. Like, for instance, the Next Generation. I don't think that Tasha Yar, for instance, would have much trouble in hand-to-hand combat with a Klingon. I don't think Riker would either. I think it'd be realistic for Picard to have trouble. And I'm very pleased to report that in a lot of Next Generation novels where Picard does have physical combat, he's not the be-all and end-all. He's an older man. Physical combat has never been part of what he wants to do or what he considers important, or we can assume what he trains for. But you've also got Data, who is unbeatable. Much like Odo, he is unbeatable. And so on and so forth. I mean, the Voyager crew has Tuvok, who's a 100-year-old tactical officer. It's going to be pretty tough to beat him in physical combat. But that it's pleasant to revisit moments like that in this book, but that's all I got out of it. So I'm gonna drop the Dominion War, and I think I don't want to stress this too much, but I think that one of the reasons that this book was sort of a dud for me is because of the curse of Deep Space Nine. I don't think I am meant to enjoy Deep Space Nine fiction, unless maybe, just maybe, I write it myself. This was definitely a continuation of the curse of Deep Space Nine. So I'm gonna pull far away from that, and we will see what happens next time. I'm really tempted in a way to reread some Strange New Worlds fiction. I've been watching the Strange New Worlds second season and trying to nudge my Book Trek co-hosts into discussing it with me, even in private. I have a million trillion things to say about it, but I don't know that it would translate to fiction. I don't really trust the current crop of Star Trek writers. There are only a couple, and they're kind of dull. I get the impression that they get their contracts because they deliver serviceable prose on deadline. But when did that become enough for Star Trek fans? I don't know. So I think I'll stay away from Strange New Worlds, but that still leaves plenty of Trek fiction to do. I think I'm evolving a fiendish plan. I'm faintly thinking that I will stop the one video a day Trek videos when June ends. I'm kind of thinking that for July and August, I will space these things out just a bit more. We shall see. I might find it irresistible, but that's my Trek book for today. It is The Curse of Terok Nor, rearing its head again. We shall see what tomorrow brings. I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.